Hello, my name is Jim McGillivray and this is the Pipe Box, your source for all things piping. If you find this video useful, please give it a like and please subscribe to this YouTube channel to see more videos like this. We're going to go over a tune today, and you can print out the music to this tune by going back to the description of this video on my YouTube channel. You'll see a link to a PDF there. Today I would like to do with you a 3/4 march called The Heroes of the Hook. It's a two-parted tune. It was written by Pipe Major Sandy Hain. Sandy was a Scot who took the Pipe Major's course at Edinburgh Castle in the early 1950s with Willie Ross. He subsequently emigrated to the Cleveland, Ohio area in the early 1960s. He passed away in 2018. He also wrote a great jig called Donald McKillop, which you will find on another video on this channel. The Heroes of the Hook was written about a battle in the Korean War called the Hook, when the Allies fought hard to secure a small promontory of land in the summer of 1952. Sandy's tune commemorates comrades of the Black Watch who fought, and many of whom died in that battle. The level of difficulty of this tune is easy, very easy. Besides G and E grace notes, it has a B doubling, a high A doubling, a D throw, and an E half doubling. That's not a lot, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you know how to play those pieces of technique. Okay, let's start by hearing the whole of The Heroes of the Hook, played on a Blair digital chanter. That was the 3/4 march, The Heroes of the Hook, played on a Blair digital chanter. Let's have a quick look at the whole score for this tune now. We're going to focus on two main points in this tune today. In the first bar, the lead-in bar, you see that the two lead-in notes are circled. In the rest of the tune, you'll see other pairs of notes circled. I want to talk about how we need to point these pairs of notes strongly wherever they appear. In bar 2, you see a B doubling circled. We're going to talk about how important it is to play doublings on the beat to know exactly which grace note in the doubling is on the beat. There's not much more to focus on in this tune other than making sure that you have clean note changes. This first bit of instruction may apply more to beginners, advanced beginners, and intermediates than more experienced players, although the more experienced players may get something out of it as well. Let's look at the lead-in bar, the very first notes of the tune, a dotted F 8th note followed by a 16th E. There's a D throw right after this couplet, and that makes that couplet a little bit more challenging. In my experience, less experienced players tend to play this couplet quite round, and couplets like it quite round. So what I often hear at the start of this tune is something like this. With a very lazy E. We really need to point this. Long F, very short E down to the D throw. Playing a complex piece of technique after a short note is difficult, so it may take a little bit of extra practice. If we go to line 2, bar 2, right at the end of that bar, we see another couplet, a D throw, again with a dotted 8th note followed by a 16th note. After that is a simple G grace note to F. So this should be a spot where you can try to point as much as you can and can probably have lots of success because it's not followed by a complex piece of technique. So bar 2 in line 2. So watch it doesn't round out like this. Pointed. Right after that, in the second last bar, in line 2, is another couplet, a high A dotted 8th, followed by a 16th F. Again, point it as much as you can. It's a little bit difficult doing that little run down to the E, to the G grace note on E, but hold the high A, shorten the F. Avoid. Nice and pointed. What I'd like to do now is play the first part for you on the practice chanter. I'd like you to listen carefully to how these couplets are pointed. I want you to also listen to how I handle the doublings and the half doublings in this part. We will talk more about this in the second part. Here's the first part. I hope you could hear how strong the pointing was in the couplets in that first part. This continues into the second part. We see it in the very first bar, the lead-in bar to the second part, where we have a dotted F8th followed by a high G 16th. Again, very pointed to start the second part. Avoid. Pointed. What I'd like to focus on more in the second part are the doublings and half doublings. So if we look at bar 2 in the second part, we see it begins with a B doubling. I've circled the G grace note in this B doubling because that is the most important grace note in the doubling. I want you to make sure when you hit this doubling that you play the G grace note in the doubling on the beat. By on the beat, I mean when your G grace note hits the chanter, your foot hits the floor. So the first 2 bars will sound something like this. Pipers often put the second grace note in a doubling on the beat, and that kind of knocks the tune out of line. So those 2 bars would sound like this. Where the B doubling would be early. Put the G grace note on the beat. In bar 4 of line 3, I've circled the first grace note in the E half doubling, which is an E. That very first grace note is on the beat. So when we come down from the high A, we're going to hit that E squarely on the beat. And then the F grace note is going to come in afterwards. So here is line 3, bar 3 and 4. If you make the mistake of putting the F grace note on the beat, it will come out sounding like this. And you're hitting the E early. Wait for it. Your fingers hit the chanter when your foot hits the floor. There are high A doublings in this tune as well. They follow the same pattern. The very first high A grace note is on the beat. I haven't highlighted these because I generally find pipers are pretty good at putting high A doublings on the beat. One more point I'd like to make before I play the second part. Playing this tune well takes a lot of patience. There are notes that are the same length. There are lots of quarter notes. For example, in the first bar of part 2, we have a run of eighth notes. I find that pipers can get impatient in these runs of eighth notes and in long quarter notes, and they tend to come off them early. So I might hear the first couple of bars of the second part played like this. Instead of be patient. Give the long notes their due. Okay, let's hear the second part played in the practice chanter. I hope you could hear that this tune needs to be played pointed, measured, and very much on the beat. Quite like most pipe tunes, actually. Optimum tempo for this tune would be somewhere between 79 beats per minute and 88 beats per minute. 79 would be a very relaxed tempo. 88 would be perhaps a band marching tempo. For learning purposes, I don't generally give people a tempo. I want you to learn the tune from scratch, and before you worry about tempo, I want you to think about technique and make sure your technique is strong. If you play the tune quicker than your technique can manage, you're going to end up practicing poor technique, and over time you will get very good at playing poor technique. If technique is a bugbear for you, I might suggest my Rhythmic Fingerwork technical tutor. It contains 141 exercises, all of which are on audio recordings, lots of instruction on how to play technique correctly and how to practice it. I've had fantastic feedback from people over the years. The book is work, but if you like to do the work, it will make your piping better. I hope you enjoy the Heroes of the Hook. It's a great little tune for intermediate or beginner players you may be teaching or learning if you are one yourself. It's also a great tune for a lower grade or community band to play. That's it for Heroes of the Hook. From me, Jim McGillivray at the Pipe Box. Good piping.